Let me see. I always do this. I don't see it. Hold on, man. Let's say we live.
Yeah, it's where we live.
All right. Okay, I see it. I don't know why I do that to me, man.
You said
All right.
today the 25th?
Yeah, today the 25th. All right. I want to say ETM Hotel. Dua Dua Aku, Dua Necha, Fatma Walafie, Fatma Iwapele, Igun Majube Ibai, Igungun Kiki, Igungun. I always have to give honor and praises to the ancestors because, again, without the ancestors, we wouldn't be here. We are our ancestors. Welcome back to Kofi Pie Side TV. We have another nice presentation today. My brother Setepenre Meri will be presenting another powerful presentation today. Before we get started, let me share my screen, start the show off. That will bring Matilda and Tanya back to West. Hold on. You go back. Rival predators pose another lethal threat. If the cubs are found unattended by a keen-eyed weapon. Somebody mute their mic. I think that's yours, Satel.
Man in the knowledge of himself is a superb and supreme picture of creation. When man becomes possessor of the knowledge of himself, he becomes a master of his environment, the captain of his own ship, the director of his own destiny, the accomplisher of his own ends. Man should understand himself because man is full of knowledge, and this knowledge is a gift of nature. When Mother Nature created man, she deprived him of nothing. He was given the faculty of understanding all things around him. His faculty for understanding has not been taken away from him. None of his senses have been taken away from him. So there is no excuse to the black man. Red, black, and green, queens and kings, salute, now scream, I should bring crumble underhanded, I should. I'm ripping my team, red, black, and green, queens and kings, salute, now scream, I should bring crumble underhanded, I should.
All right. Before we get started, brother, let me start sharing my screen. Before Satep gets started, brother, any Harret, Sean Calfani, you got something to say before we get started? And peace to the family in the chat. Peace to Ibibo. Peace to She Simply Unique. Peace to Dr. Oyama Odd. Peace, peace, sister. Go ahead, any Harret.
You sure I can speak?
Yes, sir. You have permission to speak, sir.
Hey, y'all ain't gonna be clowning on my little show. So I'll let y'all know that off top. I'll get ETM Hotel. Rennie, Sean, welcome to Peace. My name is Sean. Thank everybody for tuning in this evening to another episode of Kofi Pie Side TV. Mr. Iwabaru Setepenre on deck. And I'm looking for an impactful show, man. We're going to deal with scientific racism and all of that. Peace to the chat again. To the great sister, Dr. Ma'at. To She Simply, Vasa, you know, at BBO. Everybody, man. Everybody with the love and support, man. Like the show, share the show. Tell a friend, so Tep can get it in, man. And I'm ready to be blown away, man.
All right, Vasa, you got something, man, before we get started?
Peace to the panel, peace to the chat, and peace to the future listeners of the show. Satep, much peace to you, and I'm looking forward to your show, brother.
All right. Like NRS Sean Calfani said, please share the show, like the show, tell a friend to tell a friend. The to tell a friend. I think they're gonna enjoy the information that my brother Setepenre Meri gonna be presenting today. So I'm gonna turn it over to my brother. Go ahead, Setep. I'm gonna mute my mic.
All right, peace. Let me get my screen sharing. All right, can you see it on the chat or YouTube?
Hold on, let me go back and look. I'm on here trying to share the show. Yeah, we can see it.
You see it on the chat. All right, so it's a tab. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We're gonna be dealing with the forgotten history of human zoos and scientific racism today. This came about. I was gonna do something on eugenics, and then I just seen something about this and kind of intrigued me. So I started digging into it, and I was like, okay, this is something I need to bring to the forefront. So let's go ahead and get it in. If anybody got any questions on the panel, please write them down, and we can go back. If anybody got any questions in the chat, write them down, and we can go back. Okay, so we're gonna start out with the human zoos. Human zoos or how thousands of indigenous peoples were put on public display in America in the early decades of the 20th century, often touted as missing links between man and apes. These native peoples were harassed, demented, and jeered at. Sorry. Their public display was arranged with the enthusiastic support of most the elite members of the scientific community, and we're gonna get into that too, because the elite members of the scientific community is the scientific racism part of this. And it's a direct link to this human zoos. And it was promoted uncritically by America's leading newspapers. Okay, so this is the main one that I'm going to be discussing. They had human zoos in Germany. They had them in Paris. They had one in New York. They had one in St. Louis. This is the most prominent one right here. The World's Fair, St. Louis, 1904. And this is actually what it looked like. Here is one of the tickets to get in this. So I had to dig this up, but yeah, this is an actual ticket that was saved through time that was a pass to get into the zoo. So whoever this person is, this was their ticket to the zoo. And it wasn't, no, I ain't gonna act like it was just the zoos was just about humans in there, because it was like it was a fair, so you know it was other stuff in there, but we're gonna put a spotlight on this. All right, so St. Louis World Fair, known officially as the Louisiana Purchase Expedition. The St. Louis World's Fair ran from April 30th to December 1st, 1904, and was one of the most famous internationally expositions held in the United States in the early 20th century, attended by more than 19 million people. So it was 19 million people that came to this zoo and seen our people on display, amongst other things. Organizers imported thousands of indigenous people from around the world to be put on public display in what was essentially a giant human zoo. Unlike freak shows, the human zoo in St. Louis was created with the cooperation of America's scientific establishments. So the scientific community was in cahoots with the zoo, the fair. This is the one in Paris right here. It's the entrance to it. Now we're gonna start dealing with some of these scientific people that had their hands in it. William McGee, leading American scientist in the early 1900s, as a head of the anthropology department at the St. Louis World Fair, he was determined to showcase indigenous peoples at the fair to dramatize for the public the different stages of human evolution. Now, this the man right here. He tried to say that the pygmy was the missing link between
aping man. Here's a video about him.
At the end of the 19th century.
Oh, my bad.
At the end of the 19th century, academics were only just beginning to study humankind in scientific terms. This new science of anthropology saw human zoos as an opportunity to investigate humanity close up. Living labs where they could study all of the races in one place. One of the first American anthropologists spotted the potential of human zoos and set his sights on building the biggest and most popular human zoo ever, with more human specimens than any other. His name was William McGee.
McGee always had to do everything bigger, more showy, and just in your face, I am the best. He was a stubborn, ambitious individual, but he was also one of the greatest and most well-known scientists of the last century.
McGee's human zoo would be more than spectacular public entertainment. McGee had a point to prove to the public.
Those who know the races realize that the average white man is stronger of limb, fleeter of foot, clearer of eye, and far more enduring of body under stress of labor and hardship than the average yellow or red or black. Despite the special proficiency along a few narrow lines sometimes displayed by the lower types and drawn large in traveler's tale. What he wanted to do in St. Louis was show people how human beings had developed and how human cultures and races had developed. He decided to bring the extreme. He wanted to get the tallest people in the world, and he thought they were people from Patagonia, which is down at the tip of South America. Okay? Since there was the tallest people in the world, he wanted the smallest people in the world. So he went over, he sent an expedition over to the Belgian Congo in that area to get pygmies. He wanted the Ainu, who were up in this island north of Japan, supposedly the hairiest people in the world. He also wanted what he considered the most primitive American Indian group, which was the Cocopah in Mexico. McGee wanted the Eskimo, people from South Africa. Logistically, it was a nightmare.
The biggest nightmare belonged to McGee's special agent, the explorer and pygmy expert, Samuel Phillips Werner. To bring back pygmies for McGee, he had to embark on a daredevil trip into the heart of Africa.
He was just excited by every bit of it. He was that kind of a guy. If you told him that a place was dangerous, he'd say, I want to go there. I have here.
All right. Now, this gonna get into this dude right here, Samuel Werner. I call him, they call him an explorer. I call him a hunter because that's what he was doing. So Samuel Phillips Werner, the African-obsessed explorer, anthropologist, and missionary from South Carolina, was responsible for bringing Congolese man Otabanga to the United States, where he was put on exhibition at the St. Louis World's Fair and later at the Bronx Zoo. Here's something on him.
Over in the Congo, the explorer Samuel Werner had been laid low for weeks with malaria. But he was about to come across the first of the pygmies on his shopping list.
It was on an occasion when he was going up the Congo River, and the boat broke down, the steamboat. And the captain said it would take 2 weeks for the spare parts to come. And he was told by the captain that he shouldn't go into this area. They should all stay on the boat until they got the parts to fix it, because there might be cannibals in the area. Well, that's all he had to tell my grandfather. There were cannibals. Boy, he was out there in a minute, looking for them, wanting to talk to them, wanting to maybe share a meal with them. Who knows? And when he walked into one of their villages, he found that they had captured people in local tribal wars and were keeping them in cages. And some of them apparently even preparing for them to be eaten. That's when he encountered his first pygmy. My grandfather's first impressions were that the pygmy was a particularly fine specimen of the sort of people that he wanted to bring to St. Louis. And he asked the pygmy if he would like to go with him. The pygmy expressed that he'd rather take his chances with St. Louis than suffer being eaten by the cannibal tribe. My grandfather traded a roll of brass wire and some salt for the pygmy's freedom. The pygmy's name was Setepenre. I mean, I don't know for sure, but I think he had never seen white people before. And Werner offered him some water, and that sort of created an initial good impression. He spoke to Werner in his native Chaluba, which Werner understood and speak back.
With Setepenre's help, Werner managed to persuade 5 other pygmies to leave the Congo. Nearly 6 months after he started his mission, he was ready to make his return trip across the Atlantic.
Once he got to Matadi, he could get on a steamer that took him directly over to the United States through New Orleans. They had a stop in Cuba, by the way, in Havana along the way, probably to pick up some cigars. The journey was pretty uneventful, and the pygmies probably thought it was a very long journey, much longer than they were used to. And they also wanted to know how the boat was powered. They thought that it had a cage full of hippopotamuses down beneath it that were pedaling it along. And Werner showed them how the steam engine worked.
Mid-June 1904, the pygmies caught their first glimpse of America. They docked in New Orleans. Now it was the pygmies' turn to explore.
They marveled at the size of buildings, at the way the streets were laid out, how complex things were, how people had houses full of bright and beautiful things. So it was very strange to them, but I don't think they had any fear.
While Werner recovered from his malaria, he sent the pygmies to St. Louis by rail.
Of course, that too was an amazing thing for them to be on a railroad train.
In St. Louis, the pygmies would be the anthropologist William McGee's most important example of an inferior race. But Werner, the explorer who'd lived among the pygmies, had come to a very different conclusion about them.
Pioneering in Central Africa, the major book written by my grandfather. Let me look in the index on the chapter on pygmies in here. Of one fact, my experience and observation completely convinced me that these pygmies are human beings in every sense of the word. He lived among them.
Okay, so on one hand, you have McGee sending Werner, the hunter, because they're trying to clean it up, but he was really a hunter. Talking about they traded salt and all this and that. Talking about he was captive by some other pygmies, and he'd rather go with him than be killed by the pygmy. Who in the hell gonna go with somebody, a white man, and you don't know if the white man gonna eat you? So they trying to clean it up, but on one hand, you have McGee sending Werner over there to get and capture indigenous pygmies and try to prove that black people are inferior to white man. Because you heard the lady on the last video. She said that in the book, dude said, or McGee said that the white or the brown man, the red man, and the black man is inferior in every way to the white man. We know that to be false. Okay. And they tried to put it on display and it backfired on them. So let's move on.
Yeah, can I mention something real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, they keep saying the pygmies.
I'm gonna get into that. But go ahead though.
Go ahead. No, I'm gonna let you.
I got uncovered there. I covered a lot of base. I got a whole slide on the pygmy, what that mean, and all that. So I got that covered too.
Okay.
All right, now since we was talking about Outer Banga, let's get into this. Outer Banga was an Mbutu man, known for being featured in the anthropology exhibit at the Louisiana Purchase Exposition in St. Louis, Missouri in 1904, and in the Human Zoo exhibit in 1906 at the Bronx Zoo. So they put him on display in Missouri for a while, and then they sent him to the Bronx Zoo, and they tricked him when he got to the Bronx Zoo, and I think they called the exhibit "Monkey in a Cage" or "Man in a Cage" with something like that. You know what I'm saying? And they had him in there. They tricked him and had him in there with monkeys and stuff and a orangutan. And there's a picture online if you look him up where he holding a little chimpanzee and stuff like that. Y'all want to look in deeper because I'm just covering the surface area. If y'all want to get deep with it, because each person that I'm getting ready to go into, you can do a single presentation on each person. So you could he deserves a single presentation on his own, but I'm just gonna cover the human zoo side of it and let y'all know who the players is in this and who was the people affected by it. Now, this probably what you was gonna say, Kofi. And after I get through this slide, go ahead and elaborate on it. But known as a pygmy, the term pygmy is most associated with the nomadic native tribes of the equatorial African, such as Mbutu tribe, which is where Outer Banga is from. The tribes are typically nomadic hunter-gatherers and are usually the first inhabitants of the region. They are forest dwellers. They know the forest, the plants, and the animals, and believe the forest to be a kindly personal God. And this come from Africa Guide 2015. So yeah, they like to call the pygmy, they like to call them pygmy, but they really the Mbutu people. And they the nomadic tribe, you know, and they some people call them the forest dwellers as well. So go ahead, Kofi.
No, I was just going. You already mentioned when you gave his name and stuff. I was just going to say they go by the Mbutu, the Mbutu people. These are the people that are from Central Africa. They are believed to be the first inhabitants of that region. And then later on, you had a different migration. You had a migration of people coming from West Africa. And then you had another migration that came from East Africa, and those groups merged. But the Mbutu people, as the migration came from the West and from the East, these Mbutu people would push further and further off into the forest. So you get the name forest dweller. But the pygmy term, they did not go by the term. This was a term that the outsiders gave them.
Okay, I appreciate that. Let's move on. All right, now I'm gonna play a video on Outer Banga because I like his story, and in this video they really show him in a good light right here.
Outer Banga began to draw the most attention. He was described in the press as a dwarfy black specimen of sad-eyed humanity. But the pygmy was turning performer.
He used to get paid to smile for photographs and would get 5 cents and 25 cents and sign his autograph, which is how they made money there. The pygmies turned out to be great entrepreneurs, and they saw this as a diplomatic mission. It had nothing to do with racial categories. They were on a mission to the United States to demonstrate and to show Americans how cultured and civilized they were. They didn't realize that McGee was putting up signs that said they were savages. Never occurred to them.
No matter what his subjects thought, McGee was able to draw the conclusions he wanted from his anthropological experiment. The results are contained in his original report. It's been hidden away for the best part of a century, rarely recovered from the archives.
He was described by McGee in his report as very typical because he was exactly the right height that everybody thought pygmies should be. And because he was the right skin color, and because he had filed teeth, it basically reinforced the stereotypes that people came to the fair with. So he became the archetype, the model, the perfect one.
In his report, McGee seems to have had no doubt that the pygmies were every bit as savage as he'd imagined. But as the fair went on, the pygmies were unwittingly frustrating all of McGee's theories.
The pygmies used to go out, and one of their favorite things to do was buy cigars. They would get cigars every day, and one of the people in the Turkish pavilion would give it to him. And McGee used to get mad because pygmies are too primitive to smoke cigars. Therefore, he would take those away. In fact, the newspapers called him the overlord of the savage world. And then all the pygmies had top hats, and they used to wear them all the time. And that didn't coincide with the pictures and what they wanted to present at the fair.
For McGee, the misbehavior of the pygmies was the final straw. He believed his anthropological experiment had been scuppered, and that he'd failed to gather enough evidence for the superiority of the white race. A year after the fair, he would turn his back on humans and choose to study rocks instead. But by the time the fair closed in December 1904, and the savages were on their way home, 20 million people had passed through its gates, and most went away believing that anthropology had publicly demonstrated that the white race was superior. For them, racism had been given a scientific seal of approval, and scientific racism was now set to change the course of the 20th century.
Okay. So you heard what they just said. The pygmies, they were great entrepreneurs. They out here in 1904 signing autographs, buying cigars, because that was the thing to do, wearing top hats. They trying to style. They thinking they there to show their culture, because in the exhibit, they will have them recreate their living environments, which they do in zoos now. You know what I'm saying? They do that in zoos now, where they recreate the lions environment, the gorillas environment, or whatever animal in there that they can recreate. So like she said, the pygmies, they was in there styling. I'm gonna just say it like that. They was in there styling, and he got so upset and discouraged about it, he went to go studying animals and rocks. I think she said animals. He was so discouraged that he couldn't show the pygmy for what he really was, or what he assumed he was. Let me say that. What he assumed he was. And the pygmies was showing high culture in there. And he didn't like it, so he went to studying something else. Now, I'm going to get into her, because Sarah Bartman. Because this woman right here, we see this a lot. And I ran across this, so I'm going to go ahead and show her some love on this presentation right here. Okay, a 20-year-old girl from South Africa known as Sarah, I don't know how to say that part right there, so I'm not going to say it, Bartman, would be the emblematic of the dark era that gave rise to the popularity of human zoos. She was recruited by an exotic animal dealer on location in Cape Town and traveled to London in 1810. So this is way before Adabanga's time, but this just go to show how long they've been doing it. To take part in an exhibit or exhibition. The young woman went willingly. We don't know that, but that's just what they saying. Under the pretense that she would find wealth and fame. And they could have tricked her. You know what I'm saying? They could have tricked her. Say, hey, come with me. We run around the world. You get money showing off your body, whatever. They do it now. They do it now. So this ain't nothing new. But I'm just shedding light that they've been doing this for a while. Exhibitors were looking for certain qualities in their exotic recruits that they coincide with the European beauty ideal or offered unexpectedly novel. Sarah had a genetic characteristic known as, I don't know what that word is right there. She had a elongate. She had a big buttocks and elongated labias. Y'all seen that in the picture up there. She found herself being exhibited in cages and sideshow attraction dressed in tight-fitting clothes that violated any cultural norms, decency at the time. And we know they weren't wearing, and you know, in the 1800s, they wasn't wearing no tight clothes. They weren't wearing no leggings. You know what I'm saying? They had her on display. A few years later, she came to Paris, where racial anthropologists poked and prodded and made their theories. Sarah eventually turned to prostitution to support herself and drank heavily. She had been in Europe for only 4 years. So they basically used and abused her. They used and abused her. She went to drinking and prostituting, which we see this today, man. We see this today. That's what's so shocking about this. They've been doing it for this long. When she died in poverty, Sarah's skeleton, sexual organs, and brain were put on display at the Museum of Mankind in Paris, where they remained until 1974. In 2002, President Nelson Mandela formally requested the reparations of her remains. Nearly 200 years after she had stood on deck and watched her world behind her. Oh yeah, watch her world disappear behind her. Sarah Bartman finally went home, where the air smell of book and mint, and the veil called out her name. So Nelson Mandela requested for her remains. So he basically said, get her out of that museum, bring her back home. And here's just a little picture I threw in there. This a little girl. I think that's in Germany, I think, where that picture from. And they in there feeding the little girl, you know, making her look like a little monkey. And then on the left-hand picture, where it say human zoos at, you got the people over here. Them look like the Khoisan people, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know what they are, but they look like them. Okay. Now,
that's what they look like.
Yeah, they look like them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a little bit on the human zoo side of things. Now let's deal into the scientific racism. And we're gonna break down this word. Scientific racism is an attempt to co-opt the authority of science to justify racial prejudice. Race is a product of culture and human imagination. It has no scientific basis. The idea presented by prominent of scientific racism are designed to make racism seem scientific and acceptable when in reality it is neither. Scientific racism in the 19th century. Throughout the 18th and the 19th century, the scientific and industrial revolutions altered the cultural landscape of the Western world. At the same time, in the Atlantic slave trade, the proliferation of European imperialism and the genocide of numerous indigenous peoples in the Americas amplified racist discourage. In order to justify the atrocities in the age of science and reason, scientific explanations were sought to justify racist exploration. So basically, they're trying to use science to be like, okay, these people are inferior, so they don't need to be here anymore. Basically, that's basically what they're saying. They're using science to justify killing a bunch of people that they don't understand, and it's been here way longer than they have. Now, Madison Grant, he the father of scientific racism. He the one, Madison Grant, zoologist, known primarily for his works as eugenicist and conservationist. As a eugenicist, Grant was responsible for one of the most notorious works of scientific racism and played an attractive role in crafting strong immigration restrictions and I forget what that word is. I don't know. Law. I think that word right there mean you can't integrate. I think that's what that means.
Correct.
Yeah. Laws in the United States. So he was against integration, which ain't nothing wrong with that. I don't fault him for being against integration. I'm with that part right there. Let's watch this video on him.
Called Madison Grant, a wealthy conservationist who had founded the Bronx Zoo. He was also one of America's greatest racists. He had decided to put Setepenre on display, to educate the masses about scientific racism. When Madison Grant died in 1937, it is said that his family burned all of his papers. His remaining legacy is a book.
A rigid system of selection through the elimination of those who are weak or unfit, in other words, social failures, would solve the whole question in 100 years. Race feeling may be called prejudice by those whose careers are cramped by it, but it is a natural antipathy which serves to maintain the purity of type. If the melting pot is allowed to boil without control and deliberately blind ourselves to all distinctions of race, creed, or color, the type of Native American of colonial descent will become as extinct as the Athenian in the age of Pericles and the Viking in the days of Rollo.
So what is this book that you're reading?
This book is The Passing of the Great Race by Madison Grant, a classic of American racist literature.
The Passing of the Great Race was a bestseller when it was first published in 1916. It promoted the idea that the survival of the white master race, the Nordics, as Grant called them, was threatened by the lower races, so they had to be kept apart. Although Grant was only an amateur anthropologist, he was highly influential.
He was a player. He was an insider. He hobnobbed with the big scientists, and the big scientists agreed with him. This is someone who was a Yale graduate at Columbia Law School, and with the luxury of not having to work for a living because he was independently wealthy, he devoted himself full-time to early conservation, for which his work is generally admired, and early anthropology, for which of course is not admired.
Grant, a eugenicist, argued that evolution should not be left to chance. He lobbied for laws banning interracial marriages and limiting immigration, laws passed by people softened up by human zoos, and now susceptible to Grant's arguments.
The cross between a white man and an Indian is an Indian. The cross between a white man and a Negro is a Negro. The cross between a white man and a Hindu is a Hindu, and the cross between any of the 3 European races and a Jew is a Jew. When I read my students Madison Grant, and I read it angrily, my students say, why do you take such a personal interest in this? And I say, well, because it was my grandparents and great-grandparents that he was trying to keep out of the United States. It is a very personal story for most Americans, in fact.
Grant's argument found followers all over the world. In 1930, after The Passing of the Great Race was translated into German, Grant was bestowed with what he regarded as one of his greatest honors.
He received a fan letter from an aspiring politician in Germany, which said, "Your book is my Bible," signed Adolf Hitler. Grant's correspondence has disappeared. That letter is not with us anymore, but there is eyewitness testimony that he brandished this letter at people to show how great and how influential both he was, and how seriously the Germans were taking his ideas, which is something he was proud of. He was a real by the way. Put that on your television.
3 years after Hitler sent his letter to Madison Grant, he seized power in Germany and turned his hero's ideas into policy.
Once the Nazis adopted it and embraced it wholeheartedly, that caused a lot of Americans, although not all Americans, to rethink it. Some American scientists were saying things like, hey, the Germans are beating us at our own game, and this is a bad thing. We need to get more like them. So there's a dirty little history there that we do need to bring out into the open.
The Nazis set about using scientific racism as the foundation of the Third Reich. They took the ideas that were promoted in human zoos further than anyone else, instituting a systematic elimination of inferior races in the defense of their own superior Aryan race. In the end, it slaughtered millions in the name of scientific racism.
All right, so there you have it. You just met the man that inspired Hitler. You know what I'm saying? And like I said, they was doing the human zoos, and Hitler read this book, The Passing of the Great Race, and it inspired him to uplift the whole country and rally up people behind him. And I know people hear about the Aryan race, the Aryan this, the Aryan that. They basically was pushing the what was it, the Nordic type people like the Vikings and stuff like that, saying that they are the great race and all this and that. So yeah, I mean, he the one who inspired Hitler, and I'm doing this research, and I didn't even know that. And I done did presentations on Hitler in school when I was in school, and didn't know that he got this information from him. So I mean, that's a little deep to me. I just got one more slide left because the more and more I got to searching this stuff up, the more matter I was getting. So let me just go ahead. All right, so the passing of the great race. The passing of the great race was a racial interpretation of contemporary anthropology and history, stating race is the basic motor of civilization. We know this to be false because race is a social construct to classify humans based on phenotypes. In my opinion, culture drives civilization. So these is my words right here. Culture drives civilization, not racism. And here's my references right here. I'll lead this up for a little bit, and we can open up the mics. Anybody on the panel got any questions for me or anything to say? And if anybody in the chat, now's the time to do that.
Yeah.
Can you?
I was about to say now he don't want to talk.
Hey, keep it kosher.
I'm still having problems with my headphones. I apologize about that. But there's a book. I put the name of it in the chat. The Myth of Race: The Troubling Persistence of an Unscientific Idea. And it speaks to a lot of this. But the first chapter also talks about some of the earlier key players in developing these ideas. And particularly, I want to say Blumenbach, how they studied African literature, and how Blumenbach himself had an entire library full of Black authors and um, African science and ideas as well, and how he was one of the ones who fought against this, what we call scientific racism. But they also say he's the one who keyed or coined the word Caucasian to group them, and it was more on an aesthetic level, that he looked at it from the lens of identifying his people as the most beautiful. But they say that could have been possibly because his limitation to travel to the world, which I don't really want to get into that. That's just some of the things the book mentions.
I just wanted to add just a little bit that you did a good job on bringing this information out, because a lot of people don't engage in the understanding of scientific racism. When the Armor Rock Squad tries to teach or mention or talk about science from the perspective, people like to throw out scientific racism without actually understanding it. So we actually see scientific racism on many levels, but the way that like you said in your presentation, the way this what you want to call them, animal or a poacher or a hunter went after and targeted specific people, just goes to show how they were all in cahoots in trying to paint this narrative in this era. Many people have to remember that this was an era where they were trying to whitewash world world history and try to deal with their inferiority complex and their own personal problems that they had with people that they couldn't become or surpass. And I think one of the better authors in understanding scientific racism and the causes and effects is the the Iceman Inheritance book, which speaks to the psychology of the ignorance of the white man, so to say. But all in all, man, I really don't have any questions. I think you did a really good job. I mean, you took it in the direction that needed to go. You know, and that's that on that. Hopefully, you can talk now, man, since you breathing hard.
No, I got something in my throat. No, I mean, I just want to say, man, it was a good job, and we talked about this behind the scene. We could have went in further. You know, he mentioned um Grant and Hitler. You know, he mentioned eugenics, and you know, we can go further into the eugenics society and the things that they did with the eugenics society that was carried on after he passed, and those clinics by Margaret Singer, who was also connected to the eugenics. That may be something, man, that we may get into. Maybe do a part two, and we'll go a little bit
Yeah,
further.
you know what? That's what I was gonna say, because like I said, I got into this when I was looking into eugenics, and the presentation kind of ended on a eugenics type of thing, you know. So we was behind the scenes. Me and Kofi was chit chat. Maybe we'll team up and do something on eugenics, and we'll expound on this and go part two. So yeah, that's something we could look forward to.
Yeah,
Yeah, y'all gonna have to throw what is it, Planned Parenthood in that conversation.
yeah. That's who I
Gonna
mentioned by
have to.
Margaret Singer. She was
Yeah.
connected. Eventually, she was connected to the eugenics society. So yeah, we'll talk about that, man, and elaborate it on. I think that'll be interesting. Be a part two to it, just to
All right.
expose some.
For the record, scientific racism is a pseudo-scientific belief. For the record. So when people throw it out there, it is a pseudo-scientific belief from the start. And that's why he said what he said in his presentation to refute it, because we already have the evidence that prove that, you know, who was here first, who was inferior, who was superior, and all these old other things, and you know, the biological makeup of our ancestors versus theirs, and you know, the genetic makeup and all of that good stuff, dealing with the cranial and you know, the anthropology and all this other, all of that. So I just want to throw it out there for the record that scientific racism is a pseudo-scientific belief.
Yeah, that's right. And like when I was going in on William McGee, you know, the clip on him, he was so discouraged that the pygmies wasn't living how he thought they was living, and so he went to studying animals. You know, he was so discouraged by it. So
Rocks.
yeah, rocks. It was rocks. He went
Mm-hmm.
studying something that can't even, you know, ain't even alive. So it's like, you know, that's what trying to that's what trying to do with pseudoscience. That's what it do, man. That's what happens.
Yeah. But yeah, again, man, that was a great informative presentation, man. I hope somebody learned something. I know they learned something because I learned something out of it, man. And it's a great topic. Like I said, y'all be looking forward for us doing part two. We're gonna collaborate and go a little deeper into it. We'll go into the eugenics society. So we'll talk about the eugenics society and some of the things that the eugenics society did, and you know, Margaret Singer. We'll talk about Margaret Singer. We'll talk about parent parenthood and why it's in every ghetto across the country. So um, be looking forward for that. In her rest, Sean got something else to say. Wait, go ahead, Sean.
Oh, see, now you're trying to make it look like I was interrupting you. You know what I'm saying?
Pretty much you was, but go ahead. I'm used to it. I'm used to it. Go ahead. I'm used to it.
Ain't this something, man? Okay, so our ancestors in that era, the great minds that were trying to combat scientific racism and write their books and publish their works, you know, we have to take into account in the era that these written works were accounted for for our well-being and our understanding, for those who followed in the footsteps of actually reading these ancestors' great works, they were put forth to combat scientific racism on the grounds of not allowing racism, white supremacy to dominate the conversation and try to belittle our history. So you would have some mistakes by our ancestors that were very unscientific in certain aspects that would bleed hyperdiffusionism amongst certain type of books written, the Van Sertima's, the some other people that I don't want to name, but I just wanted to throw that out there because this is an era where they were trying to combat this type of stuff. So when you're reading our ancestors' works and you're looking at their earliest works, they were writing against those who followed the people who had put forth this pseudo scientific field study of scientific racism and zooisms. So I just wanted to put that out there for everybody because when we look at it, we have to look at our ancestors' works that were trying to combat this as well. And we have to be honest in the critiques of that because it had a lot to do with combating the misinformation and the pseudoscientific study of what Satep was mentioning the whole presentation. But that's it, Kofi. I'm sorry, man. I know this your show. And I just wanted 2.5 minutes. That's it.
Nah, man, you good, man. You good? Anybody got any questions in the chat for Brother Setepenre or any one of us on the panel? I see Saneb throwing out some good information on some authors and some books, him and Jehudi. And then I'm gonna have to go back in here and look. But anybody got any questions for Setepenre or anybody else on the panel?
Only question I seen was Ibibo.
Yeah.
Asked, was the first human zoo in the East Coast or St. Louis? I want to say the first one was the St. Louis World Fair in the United States because they was doing it overseas first. They was doing it overseas first. That's why I went into Sarah Bartman because they was doing it over there first. But yeah, I believe the first one was the St. Louis one because I couldn't find anyone that predated that one that they have a lot of evidence about. Because I know it was one in New York. But okay, I see True Historian said Barnum had an earlier human zoo. I'm familiar with Barnum, but I didn't really add him into it because I think I was telling you about him, Kofi, the Ringling Brothers and Barnum.
Yeah,
Dude,
yeah.
I was gonna add him in here, but I didn't want to get him no shine. But yeah, he did have the I think her name was Joyce Heath or something. I think it's like that. And yeah, I think he bought her from Kentucky. And if I'm not mistaken, because I read up on it a little bit, it was they was trying to say he was like Jefferson's or one of them presidents caretaker or something, and they was trying to say that she was like 100 or something years old and this and that. So yeah, Barnum, the Barnum dude, he was definitely in on that human zoo stuff too. But I think that was his only act for like when he started out. I think that was his only act. So it was kind of like a little fair type deal. It wasn't as big as the other ones, like in Paris, Germany, St. Louis. But yeah, the Barnum guy, he definitely had his hands in it. Washington. I know it was one of them presidents. But that they don't even know if that was a fact. But yeah, anybody got anything else?
No, that's all.
So, Tep, when you was doing your research about Sarah, did you see anything about Beyonce supposedly making a movie about her?
Nah, I ain't see that. Yeah, I ain't see that.
Trying to mute myself out. My girl's dog is barking. But yeah, it was spoken. I want to say right around the time she did that Super Bowl thing that she was supposed to put out a movie about her. I haven't heard anything since. So I was wondering if, when you was doing your research, if you stumbled across anything about that. And I think it was more or less just to do what you're doing to bring awareness to that particular time and what we went through, with her having such a strong influence on the youth. I think that was her way of trying to bring that to the light, but I don't know.
Yeah, that'd be nice if they did do that. Because everybody know the picture, but they just don't know the story or the name behind it. So, yeah, that'd be nice if they could draw somebody like that.
Yeah, you influenced me to take on a subject that I really haven't seen spoken about, but I'm gonna see if I can find information to find African influences on what they call the Enlightenment period, when Europe started coming into what we'll just, for argument's sake, say scientific awareness and putting things into literature. Because this argument goes back to Immanuel Kant and predates him, and it's pretty messed up that if we any of us take a college course, these are dominant figures that we all have to study. We just don't have a way to combat that. But they leave out so much of their personal biographies and personal thoughts. You know, they want to clean it up the best they can. But we need to know these stories, and we need to know how these things influenced culture and influenced the all out hells that we had to go through. Uh, but to sit back and see that you had, what was it, Edmiston? I want to say John Edmiston was the one who taught Charles Darwin. And if y'all heard me mention, Blumenbach had an entire library of African literature. And I think they say even Newton had African literature as well. And that's where he was getting his scientific data. So it kind of makes me want to go back and see what all I can find on that. So good job, Satep.
Oh yeah, I appreciate that. And once we get into this eugenics stuff, it's gonna tie to Darwin too. Because I think when I was looking that stuff up, it was tying back to him too. So
Yeah, it does. It does.
I was looking that up.
You can't. It's not on Darwin. It's on. Remember, Aunt kept breaking that down when he did with it, but it did with Darwin's what was it? His was it his brother or nephew or something like that?
His cousin, man. It may have been his cousin.
Yeah, the cousin. That's where it goes. It goes back to him, and he misrepresented Darwin's work. But yeah, y'all gonna have fun with
his brother.
Like I said, I was looking at that, and then I start messing with this. So I don't know which one is. It's in his family.
Yeah. But if anybody ain't got any hold on, true story and fun fact, Darwin came from a family of okay, he's talking about abolitionists. Darwin come from a family of
abolitionists.
Yeah. Well, okay.
Yep, sure did. I saw that too when I was doing the
Hold on, is true historian Danny?
Yeah, that's Danny.
Oh, okay. Oh, what's up, man? I ain't know that. I've been trying to put that together. Like, who is true historian?
We still don't know who true historian is. I ain't seen true historian face yet. I thought I was good to see him.
I know Daddy. What's up, Daddy?
Man, I seen his face, man. Yeah. You don't want to look at him.
Yeah, so we got a bunch of the NBK family, man. We're gonna have to do something together too, man. The NBK family, man. We're gonna have to get together and collaborate and do a show together, man. Come up with a topic, man, and do something together, man. If y'all want to, you know.
Yeah. I ain't chill with the NBK fam in a minute. They're my guys. We go back.
Yeah. Him and True Historian and Saneb and Jehudi and there was another cat. I can't even think of his name. Man, I forgot his name. But yeah, man, we're gonna have to get together, man, and do something. If anybody else got any questions for us or questions for Setepenre, Pete Robert in here too. What's up, Robert Rand?
I was trying to get the right answers for the Darwin connections. I found a Major Leonard Darwin. In this book, it said he was the son of Darwin, and he was the president of the Eugenics Society of London from 1891 to 1928.
Yeah,
I'm trying to play with dogs. Now it's time to pick up.
I knew it was one of them.
We're gonna
Yeah, Rob Bowen, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, that's my dude, Rob Bowen. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I knew Rob Bowen, but it was another one too. I can't think of his name, but the more familiar ones is I break bread with his true story and Sanel, my brother Jehudi,
Yeah,
and
you
Rob
talking
Bowen.
about Dark, man. You talking about Dark.
That
That's who
was it.
you trying to name. Dark.
Oh,
Yeah. He be dropping the jewels and then he be gone.
Yep. There's him. Yep. But man, we're gonna go ahead and end the show, man. We appreciate everybody for tuning in. Please like the show, share the show, tell a friend, tell a friend about the show. Appreciate the support. If you had subscribed to the channel, please subscribe to the channel before you log off. If you know anybody that's interested in any of the information that's on the channel provided by me or any of the other brothers that you see on the regular, any of Red Sean, California, Setepenre, Meri, Vasa Nicola Gullah, T'Challa Bangara, and Asar Imkar, tell somebody, man. We got plenty of information on the channel. I don't know if we'll be back next week, but if we're not back next week at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time, we'll be back the week after next with the part 3 of Good Character, More Ethics and More Values series. We're going to try to continue that series even going into the new year. So we'll be doing part 2, if not next week, the week after next. And on that note, I want to say Shimim Hotep. If anybody right, that's right. The Black African Netflix. That's right. The channel that takes the black man, black woman, and black child Eurocentric mind and Africanize. But if anybody else got anything, man, before I should get out.
Kofi, I'm gonna go on air, go on record. I'm gonna do my best to get mine out by the 16th.
All right, so it's recorded. So it's recorded. So we can always go back and check it in the archives that you said on 16th.
Yeah, you just make sure Brother Sean don't beat me up if it ain't all fancy like he be doing.
Yeah, the 16th. So yeah. So so we working. We're gonna continue to work. We're gonna continue to bring y'all this information. I know we don't we don't have 100 and 200 and 300 and 400 people watching, all at the same time, and that's because we ain't shucking and jiving and we ain't cooning and we ain't talking about killing each other and talking negative and to each other. We don't do foolishness over here. We like to have fun.
Stop lying. You
Nah, we
is
don't.
Mr. Iwaba Ruru, and all you do is shook and jive.
Nah, we
I
play.
don't know what Sean
Now
talking about.
I wanna answer this question because I've seen this dude mention this on Dagger Squad channel, on the Mossy channel, and now he's here in your chat and he's asking what pyramid, the Peru or Egypt. Listen, bro, Peru pyramids, the dating on the Peru pyramids come way after. And I don't even think them are pyramids, but whatever. They come way after ancient Kemet. So stop asking it, bro. The facts are based on the evidence. If you read the correct scientific journals and articles, it would tell you that any pyramid in Peru comes after. The dating is way after.
You know what, though, Sean? Sean? We ain't even gonna dive into that because what's it matter? You know what I'm? In my opinion, why?
Right. That's what I was gonna say next.
Like, what does it matter, man? It's pyramids. They ain't going nowhere. They here. Like, bro, what does it matter? Like, what does it matter? It don't matter nothing to me, so I wouldn't even answer that. If you want to go on, keep talking about it, let him keep talking about it. It don't matter nothing though. Which one older? It don't matter. So yeah, I just want to thank everybody for watching. I was real passionate about this show because it was some new information to me, something that I did not know about. And yeah, I was just real got a little heated about it, and then I kind of cut it short. But Kofi, we gonna we spoke behind the scenes, and we gonna do a part 2, and we're gonna do scientific racism / eugenics. So we're gonna do that. We'll get with y'all on a date on it, And yeah, that's it for me.
All right, then. Well, again, appreciate y'all for tuning in. Again, we appreciate y'all for tuning in because y'all could have been doing anything else with your time. Y'all rocked out with us for a good hour or so, man. Just continue. We appreciate you. We hope you continue to support us, man. And we'll see y'all next time, man. Peace, peace, peace. Hold on, let me share my screen. Wow. It's gonna play.
Man in the full knowledge of himself is a superb and supreme picture of creation. When man becomes possessor of the knowledge of himself, he becomes master of his environment, the captain of his own ship, the director of his own destiny, the accomplisher of his own ends. Man should understand himself because man is full of knowledge, and this knowledge is a gift of nature. When Mother Nature created man, she deprived him of nothing. He was given the faculty of understanding all things around him. This faculty for understanding has not been taken away from him. None of his senses have been taken away from him. So there is no excuse for the black man. Red, black, and green, queen, the king, salute, now scream, I shake, bring forth another hit, I shake, five, I'm repping my team, red, black, and green, queen, the king, salute, now scream, I shake, bring forth another hit, I shake, five,